the weekly show with David J. Maloney.
This week, David chats with New England drummer Hirsh Gardner.
And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight's show, we've got a really special guest. He burst onto the scene as the drummer for the band New England with their hit Don't Ever Wanna Lose Ya, and has continued to write and produce for some of the best and brightest in the industry. Here to chat about his brand new album, Third Time's a Charm, is none other than Hirsh Gardner. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Our featured guest tonight has been a staple of the music industry ever since he burst onto the scene with his first band, New England. He's gone on to write and produce for some of the brightest stars in the music industry. And on his new record, all of his best skills meld together into an absolutely incredible homage to the past, but also provide a promising look at the future of his music. Here to chat about it all is none other than Hirsh Gardner. Hirsh, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks very much. That was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, you've had quite the career, and I kind of would like to know, how exactly did this whole music journey start for you? What was the light bulb moment that made you say, I'm going to do this?
Wow, what a great question. Well, I grew up in Toronto, Canada. When I was really young, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, Sunday afternoons, I would watch, a lot of the American stations. And of course, there was the Mahalia Jackson show out of Detroit, Michigan. And man, when she sang, even as a young kid, the emotion that was welled up inside of me was just unbelievable. It's just like, having those type of feelings towards a musical performance at that age was kind of awe-inspiring. So that's kind of when it really, really inspired me to, start playing a musical instrument. My sister loaned me $250. I went out and I bought a little Ludwig, snare drum and bass drum and some cymbals and just started playing drums. And from that moment forward, that was kind of like my path in life.
I know one thing that doesn't often get talked about is just how much blood, sweat, and tears goes into being in the music business while you're trying to make it. Do you have a favorite I paid my dues story from those early days?
Oh, when we were in the first bands that I was in Toronto, very few of us had, amplifiers and, big, Fender amps and stuff like that. We would go to this little country and western music store up on Bathurst Street in Toronto. And so there was a church about 2 miles away that would let us go in and rehearse. So I remember renting gear at Fred Rodin's music store. And so we'd rent these, big Fender amps. And of course, in the middle of the winter, we'd bring our toboggans and snow sleds. And we put the amplifiers on the toboggans and snow sleds, and then walk the 2 miles over to the church, set the gear up, and then rehearse all on Sunday afternoon, and then, drag that gear all back to Fred Rodin's. So those were that's paying your dues, man. When you're that young, you really don't have a set path, but you kind of like make that path yourself. And that was one of the, paying dues type of things. Later on in life, paying dues, when I moved to Boston to go to Berklee College of Music in '69, I'm really dating myself, right? I was in a band that was a precursor to New England. And so, there was John Fannin and Gary Shea, Jimmy Waldo, myself, a couple other people in the band. We played every nightclub from here to Chicago, driving around in a small van and in a larger equipment truck, like a 22-foot truck. Talk about paying dues. Middle of the winter, driving through Michigan, having the gear shift pull out of the floor of the truck. And so, yeah, those were the days when you really paid your dues to play music and make a living.
When you guys really sat down and started playing and writing together, how quickly did you think you might have something special together?
There was a point in time when we did all that touring from the East Coast, the Midwest, and the band actually broke up for a couple of years. And then we decided to all get back together And at that point, we said, okay, no more nightclubs. We're not beer salesmen. We're musicians. So we're just going to hunker down in our recording studio, which was at my property. I had my regular house, and then I had another home that had. We tore all the walls out and had a rehearsal studio / recording studio. And so for about the next 2 years, from 77 to 79, we just woodshedded. We wrote songs, we recorded material with the singular purpose of just getting a record deal and playing the big sheds, going on the road. So that's kind of, so 77 to 79 is when we, just were off the road, just rehearsing. And in 79, we were discovered by the record labels and Bill O'Coin, our manager, and the rest is history, I guess.
And Bill, he was the manager for Kiss, as I recall, right?
Correct.
How did that chain of events come about where you end up being discovered by Bill?
Good story. Kiss was playing in Providence, Rhode Island. And a friend of ours knew Rick Aliberti. Rick Aliberti was Bill's second in command at O'Coin Management. So this friend called Rick and said, man, you've got to see this band. These guys are incredible. And, they've got, enough, music for an album, and they're live. They're a great band. So Rick Aliberti actually, in between gigs with Kiss, came up to our little rehearsal studio in Braintree, Mass. And we played like a 40-minute set for him. And, I'd say within a week, Bill was in the same studio, pulling up in his limousine. And we, did a set for him and blew his mind. And he basically said at the end of our set, he said, you guys are one of the best live bands that I have ever seen. I'd like to sign you. And within a week, we were in New York City, wined and dined. And that's how we met Bill. We loved Bill. He was great, great manager, and did a lot for the band. So that's how it all came about.
When you guys finally sat down to write your self-titled album, is there a studio memory that kind of has stuck with you all these years?
We recorded that album in several different studios, so there's a lot of great memories. We recorded Electric Ladyland in New York, Media Sound in New York. We recorded at, I think the record plant, I think in LA. And we also were mixing the album in London. Working with Paul Stanley and Mike Stone. I mean, Mike Stone just got off producing Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, and his next gig was to record New England with Paul Stanley from Kiss. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So yeah, I guess that, that moment was, I'm out there singing my background vocals, and I'm looking into the recording room, and there's Paul Stanley freaking staring back at me. It's like, okay, Hirsh, you better get this together. So yeah, those were some of the moments.
And this was back in their makeup days too. Was there anything weird, crazy, or special about the creation and recording of "Don't Ever Want to Lose You"? Looking back.
I guess one of the great stories that we tell a lot of is, I was out singing my background vocals, and there's a line, "You're driving home in a downpour," and of course I sing "downpour," which is the harmony of that. I'm certainly not in pitch right now, but forgive me for that. So I'm singing that part, right? And Paul's going, "Hirsh, can you try that again, man? You're a little out of tune." "Okay, Paul, no problem. Run it again." So sang it again. "Downpour." "No, Hirsh, the rhythm's a little bit off." "Okay, well, run it again." Ran it maybe 4 or 5 times, and Hirsh is not getting the part. "Hey, Paul, can you do me a favor? Can you come out and sing the part for me? Let me hear what you're hearing so I can maybe copy that." So Paul comes out, stands beside the mic, and I'm standing beside him, and they roll tape, and he sings the part. It was perfect. So then they had me do it. And I did it a couple more times. And guess what we did? We left Paul's part in, and we took my parts out. So Paul Stanley's actually singing the background vocals in the verses of "Don't Ever Want to Lose You." Just in case anybody wants to take a quick, close listen to that, it's pretty cool.
That is cool. And I mean, that song ended up being, a massive hit. When did you guys first realize this song was kind of exploding in popularity?
Yeah, that really was a great time to be in a rock and roll band and be a musician. I was driving my brand new rock and roll car, my Chevy Camaro, down Boylston Street in Boston. This was after the release, and WBCN was such a huge record station. Of course, they loved our band, and we were all good friends with all the DJs. And all of a sudden, "Don't Ever Want to Lose You" comes on the radio, and I'm driving down Boylston Street in my car. I said, "Wow, this is really cool. There's my song." And just for giggles, I hit WCOZ, which was the other rock station, right in the middle of the song. And guess what was playing on that station at the same time? "Don't Ever Want to Lose You." That just flipped me out. Shortly after that, we did a couple gigs, and then we flew out to Denver. We played at the Rainbow Theater, and as we were limoing in from the airport to the hotel, "Don't Ever Want to Lose You" came on the radio station in Denver. So here we are, thousands of miles from home, hearing our song play. We just told the limo driver, "Pull over." We just got out of the car. We were dancing around. We were going crazy. So yeah, it's pretty exciting to hear your song on the radio. It still is.
Yeah. Well, what about "Hello, Hello, Hello"? What story sticks out about the writing and recording of that one?
I think the recording of that was, I'm sure everybody by now has seen the Queen movie and Bohemian Rhapsody and how they layered all the background vocals. Roger was out in the vocal booth singing, and they kept on, "Roger, do that again. Yeah, sing it again. Yeah, sing it again, sing it again." And so working with Mike Stone from Queen, obviously he had these recording techniques that he'd been using with Queen that he used with New England. And especially with "Hello, Hello," the background vocals in that song are really beautifully layered with many, many, many parts. So the three of us would gather around one microphone, and we would sing our harmony parts. And then they would say, "Okay, let's do it again," but do it, double track it really, really close to the other one. So we would double track it, triple track it, quadruple track it, and that just kept on going on and on and on. And it's a recording technique that I love. And when you're listening to my latest album, or any of the albums that I'm doing, I always have like multiple layered background vocals in my recordings. I just love that sound. It's just such a great sound.
And I want to talk about that album in a second, but I had one more question before that. You mentioned Paul Stanley earlier, and as I recall, you guys toured, I think opened for Kiss, I want to say, like 79-ish, right?
Dynasty tour, yeah.
Yeah, so what was that like? Because, I mean, that was also during their crazy years, no?
It sure was. And it was totally crazy. It's like, talk about being, a musician loose on the road at, in your mid-20s and having a hit single. Kiss was phenomenal. Of course, they knew we were part of the team with Aucoin Management. Every once in a while we'd get a sound check. It was great. But I remember one crazy story. So we were playing Madison Square Garden for 2 nights in a row. And we did our set, which was really cool. Crowd loved us. And I don't think many people on Kiss tours got encores. And maybe they weren't allowed to do them, but we did. So that was one of the things. After our set, I would usually just hang out and go walk on stage and watch the band play from, stage left. Anyway, I'm standing there with this really gorgeous young lady, about 3 or 4 feet in front of me, just watching the band. Long black hair down to her butt. So I'm like, "Oh, yeah, she's pretty cute," because the young rock and roll star that I am. So I walk up to her in between, a couple of the Kiss songs, and I leaned over. I said, "Hey, how you enjoying the show tonight?"
Was it Cher?
She turned around and looked at me, and it was Cher, Gene's girlfriend. She turned around and looked at me with the most disgusting look, like, "Get away from me." It's like, so I felt like, "Ew." That was pretty funny.
There's so much more about the band's history that we could just go on and talk about. But I mean, for today, this is a great segue into your brand new record, Third Time's a Charm. First, what was the first concept idea or song or melody that started the journey towards this new record?
Well, that's a really, really good question because I write constantly. So, boy, that's just going through the list of songs on my computer and listening to some of the ideas. What will happen is that, there'll be a lyric or a melody or a drum beat, especially drum beats because I'm a drummer first, that I just think this is amazing. I should put a song together around this. And usually what I'll do is I might start with a chorus. So if the chorus, let's say it's just like, "Oh baby, I love you," and so maybe what I'll do is I'll harmonize to that, and I'll build a harmony around that because the choruses in all of my songs have these great harmonies. And then from there maybe I'll just sketch out a verse on a guitar and some chords, and then come up with a lyric idea for that. One of the things that I did on this album that I did a lot of that I hadn't done in my previous first two solo albums was collaboration. Chris Laney is one of the members of the band Pretty Maids, who are absolutely one of my favorite bands in the world. This is kind of a long story, but I'll try to truncate it a little bit. I received an email from this Chris Laney guy who I didn't know at the time. "Hey, Hirsh, I'm a big fan, and I love the stuff that you did with Vinnie Vincent. Can you tell me some of the stuff that you played on with him?" So I wrote this guy back a note. I just thought was a fan, so let's give him a response. But 6 or 8 months later, he sends me another email. "Well, this is this Chris Laney guy," and there was an attachment, and it was a song. And what it was he had recorded one of Vinnie Vincent's songs as a fan tribute, and he asked me if I'd play drums on it. And at that point, I looked him up online, and lo and behold, it's Chris Laney from Pretty Maids. Pretty Maids is one of my favorite bands. I just didn't put the name with the band. So Chris Laney and I are now fast friends. And fast forward to the recording of my album, Third Time's the Charm, Chris and I co-wrote a couple of songs, and one of them is Angel in the Sky, which is actually going to be the next single that comes out.
What of the new songs is really sticking out in your mind now that you've been able to sit on it for a bit? Is it one that you kind of expected would be your favorite that you didn't expect, or is that like kind of picking which child is your favorite?
Well, it's kind of like picking which child, but Angel in the Sky, like we said, the first release was Don't Ever Want to Lose You, which was my cover of the New England song. And we did a video of that, and the fans, the response that I got was just tremendous. It was great to hear from old fans and new fans about Don't Ever Want to Lose You and their take on that. But the next song, we actually put a post out about a month ago. It's like, "Hey guys, which song do you think would be the best second single for Hirsch's album?" And Angel in the Sky came back as a winner. And I just absolutely love that song. That's a song that Chris Laney and I co-wrote, and it's really a commercial top 40 hit single with that. I guess I would say that like the Bon Jovi drive and the New England hello 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 vibe to it. And I love the song, and I think that it was a wise choice to come out as a second single.
And on Lucia, I've got to tell you, I think you really did something to that song. I can't quite put my finger on it, but the song just feels so punchy and so alive again all these years. How did you do that or go about doing that?
Your comment is the same that I've heard from several people that have interviewed me. There's something about this new version. Now, a lot of people are saying, "Well, the old version was still, was amazing." And yeah, the original version, even 45 years later, stands on its own. I mean, I still listen to that song and just go, Jesus, that thing is amazing. But with the new players that I've got on this album, with the, more, 21st century drum sounds that we're using, I think that Don't Ever Want to Lose You now is I wanted to give this a second chance, because I really believe that Don't Ever Want to Lose You should have been a top 10, if not #1 hit single. For several reasons it wasn't, but we don't have to go back there. But Don't Ever Want to Lose You was just such a great song. It needed a second chance, and I'm really, really proud of everything that the folks played.
Well, and I almost feel like in another timeline, that song is a #1 hit immediately without question. And we were both kind of grew up in a time where you would have albums that had either concepts or themes on them. Was in your song selection, is there any through line or theme that connects the songs together, or is it based on like you said, just purely a particular element of the song that you went, what, I need to that deserves to be on this record for that reason?
Yeah, You can't say that this is a concept record. I mean, there's 6 songs that are my originals, and there's 6 songs that are the New England. So I guess that's the concept. The concept was originally to put out, a completely original album. When I record, Don't Ever Want to Lose You was the first New England song that I recorded. The story behind that goes like this. Jimmy and I were in LA. We were setting up in a recording studio because New England had some gigs in LA, and we were going to be rehearsing there. The other 2 guys weren't there. So Jimmy and I said, well, let's turn the tape recorder on, Pro Tools, and just record something. Well, let's just play Don't Ever Want to Lose You. So it was just Jimmy and I, Jimmy on keys, me on drums, and we recorded the basic track for Don't Ever Want to Lose You. And then several years later, as I'm putting my album together, Third Time's a Charm, I came across those tracks that Jimmy and I recorded. And I'm like, holy shit, this stuff sounds amazing. This is, the tracks were just great. So I started adding to them. I played a little bit of guitar and I sang all the background vocals and lead vocals, and that song just kind of like exploded. Sent it to Chris Laney, and so that's how that was the beginning concept of putting together a bunch of New England songs, and having a bunch of different guest artists play on those songs. Now, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, who's been a dear friend of mine for several years and is a huge New England fan, I sent him a note and said, Ron, would you like to play on one of the New England songs, Nothing to Fear? And he immediately mailed me back, yes, send me the track. So that's Ron Bumblefoot Thal playing all the guitar tracks on Nothing to Fear.
When you step back into the studio with these guys from years and years, and then there's years that have gone by in between, is it like getting right back on a bicycle? I mean, is it like you guys had never had a break? Do you guys get right back into it, or do you have to dust cobwebs off? How does that work?
Oh, that's a great question too, and I'll give you a story that gives you the answer to that. So New England had been off the road from like 1983 till the mid 90s, maybe early 2000s, and a friend of mine in Boston said, would New England reform and do a benefit concert? So I called the guys, and everybody's like, yeah, let's do it. So we all flew into Boston, and we got together at a little rehearsal studio in downtown, and we're like, man, we haven't played in like 25 years. What's this? Is it going to sound like crap, or is it going to be? So I counted in, was Alone Tonight is always the first song that we jump on. It's just a, kind of like up-tempo rock and roll song. I counted in 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 blah. And man, I tell you, the band sounded unbelievable. And we were just looking at each other like, holy crap, this sounds amazing. You got 25 years later of maturity as musicians. We had been rehearsing the songs on our own, so we would remember the arrangements. But just getting together in that first 5 minutes, we just looked at each other and said, wow, this is amazing. So from that day forward, once a year, we may have skipped a couple of years here and there, but we would do these gigs like once a year. We'd get together, everybody fly into Boston. We would play a bunch of gigs here in New England. We would do a couple of gigs in LA. And one year we actually went to Japan and played in Tokyo. So wow. That's, yeah.
What's next on tap for you, and what else should our audience be on the lookout for?
Well, I want the audience to be on the lookout for Third Time's a Charm. And basically that's what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to promote the record. There's, Deco Entertainment, they've been tremendously supportive. Love those guys. They're doing great. But a lot of the stuff basically falls on the artist these days. So I'm spending the next, 3 to 6 months promoting the record, hopefully releasing singles off the record. So what I'd love to say to the fans is, go to Spotify, order the album from Amazon, go to decoentertainment.com/Hirsh Gardner, and, buy the CD. The album exists on vinyl. Man, the vinyl sounds unbelievable.
Hirsh, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks a lot, man. You have yourself a great day.
You too. Ladies and gentlemen, Hirsh Gardner. That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to Hirsh Gardner for joining us. Stay safe, everyone.